My name is Nick Wolney. I'll be your moderator today for this session. I love that we're doing this session at this time. It's so important in terms of widening that pool of talent. And there are so many, I love the description of this session specifically. There's a lot of underestimated talent in the market right now. And so figuring out how to accurately and effectively reach those people, recruit those people, train those people into your organizations, that's going to be the topic of today's discussion. I'd love to introduce our esteemed panelists who are going to wow you over the next 45 minutes. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. We'll start with Mason right on the end and work our way down. Go ahead and introduce yourself, your company, and also a little bit about what your role entails in relation to recruiting, training, and or DE&I. So Mason, I'll pass it to you.
Right on. So thanks, Nick. My name is Mason Williams. I'm the global head of DEI at Mattel. So my role is, I've been at Mattel for 14 years. Traditionally, I'm what you would call a toy designer. And I take on the role of global head of DEI because of one of the things that we think about at Mattel is the idea of how do you create a culture of belonging? How do you do that? You do that by having your values aligned with your purpose, and your purpose leads into the way that we recruit, the way that we think about our development, the way that we're even thinking about the products that we do. So, I'm really happy to be here with a lot of other great people, and so thank you for having us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Ueno. I'm the SVP of HR for Hot Topic, Inc. We are a specialty retailer based in malls. We have two retail store brands. One is Hot Topic and the other is Box Lunch. And then a third brand that is primarily wholesale and direct-to-consumer called Her Universe. We have about 800 stores in all 50 states, Canada and Puerto Rico. And my role is the team leader for all of human resources. So my team is responsible for everything and all of our facilities, for our stores, our distribution centers, and our headquarters. Responsible for DE&I, learning and development, employee relations, talent acquisition, all that.
Terrific. Brian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Padilla. I'm VP HR for Lionsgate Entertainment. So maybe you've heard of us. Movies like Saw, which I think is out there right now in a big way, a little too scary for me. But I lead the business partner function for the television side of the business. So we're a studio, so you may not know that we're associated with shows like Orange is the New Black, for example, or Mad Men. Those are Lionsgate shows that have been licensed and sold, obviously, to AMC and Netflix and so on, right? But yes, I lead the business partner function for the television side of the business, so television production, television distribution. I also head up the production HR function, so that's partnerships for on-the-ground physical productions across features, television, and scripted television and unscripted television. And my role really centers heavily around supporting business strategy on the corporate side of things. But I do partner very heavily with our DEI teams and our recruitment teams, especially in the event that we identify a problem, specifically around recruiting, perhaps, often in the DEI space. So I spend a lot of time working with our DEI partners to create and implement training programs, especially on the production side. And I've been at Lionsgate about 6 years. Time flies.
It does. Rita, take it away.
My name is Rita Stahl. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Programs for Tech Elevator. Tech Elevator is an intensive in-person and online education provider assisting individuals and companies acquire in-demand technology skills for today's workforce. We offer best-in-class and free talent acquisition services, as well as offering our companies a partner on reskilling efforts to help our teams retrain into technical or hard-to-hire positions. I've been with the organization for almost 6 years, but I've spent the last 15 in talent on education and workforce development, assisting underrepresented and underestimated talent enter the workforce in non-traditional ways.
Awesome. Bertha, take us home.
And I am Berta Aro, Executive Director for Empower. Empower is a national organization based in New York, and I am the Executive Director here for California. In this capacity, I get to work both in Northern California and Southern California with organizations that are interested in hiring talent into their technology sectors. And so we have a range of programs. Our pillars really exist around training underserved young adults, also veterans and veteran spouses. We do that through information technology training with industry recognized credentials, as well as mentoring, coaching, alumni engagement, and ultimately job placement. And so we work both with the people to serve that will become a part of the workforce and the employers that need technical talent.
Fantastic. Let's give all of our panelists a hand already here introducing themselves. What fantastic introductions. Mason, I'd love to start with you. You know, Mattel's having a big year. Yeah? Talking about the Barbie movie.
Okay.
There's the Barbie movie. Okay, just for context. You know, so Mattel was founded in 1945, and I wonder, you know, for a company of this size and also of this tenure, in what ways doing an initiative like that, like some stereotype challenging storytelling, how that tenure creates advantage in terms of pursuing DEI initiatives like that. And then perhaps also, what are some of the challenges that come up with an organization that has been around for a while with regard to things like fixed mindset, or just this is always the way we've done things in terms of expanding DEI initiatives?
No, that's cool. So let me start here. So I think that when you think about when the handlers started Mattel, the idea was that they were going to make the best toys on earth for everyone. However, the everyone was not everyone that we see here. That's just the way the society has evolved over the course of time. So representation has always mattered, and it's been an evolution as we've gone forward. So when we think about the Barbie movie, I think that was like our party of saying, like, here we are, here's who we've been, and this was a moment for us to be able to say, like, this is what we believe in. Like, the idea that I could go around and say, hi Barbie, hi Barbie, hi Barbie, and like to every single one of us now, and that there is a Barbie or a Ken that looks like every single one of us now is a huge statement to say. This is what, you know, like, representation begins for childhood, and the understanding that the play is the way and purposeful play. That's something that's been completely a part of our DNA. And now we're taking that implicit value that was started in 1945, but it's now there's explicit actions, there's an explicit role, there's the way that we think about our people, the way that we think about our products, the way that we tie that all back into our purpose. So, yes, fixed mind states have been a piece of everything. Like, there are people who will always have fixed mind states. There are businesses who may operate in that way. But business growth is based upon acknowledging that, finding the ways to evolve, finding the ways to connect, finding the ways to actually grow business through purpose. Like, doing good work and doing good business are not at odds. And I think that there was a long time that people thought about the idea that, oh, if we can do social goodness and this and that, it's going to actually take away from our bottom line. Actually, it's not. It amplifies it, because if we all see the things that we ourselves and the experiences that we interact with, we're widening the fan base.
I mean, it's true. I'm a huge fan now, and I wasn't a while ago. For the whole group, I'd love to broaden it for the whole group. If stakeholders in the room are coming up against like institutional challenges or resistance to innovation from decision makers at the organization, what are some strategies they can consider in order to help sell the idea of widening the net, broadening the net for recruiting?
I'd love to start. Just if anybody's looked at research on psychology today, Schmidt and Hunter is producing some of the best valid and innovative research on finding talent and on job performance, success in job performance. And they're finding above everything else, so above years of experience, above education attainment, above a well thought out interview process, that aptitude testing is really what's the best indicator for job performance. So I think the traditional mindset is you hire somebody that has the degree or the experience in that field, where we're now kind of shifting to say, maybe we can start looking at aptitude. What are the core aptitude or the core traits that somebody needs to have to be successful in a role, and really identify talent that way.
Awesome.
I agree. I think, in terms of selling innovation, it's all about that vision. And in our business, you've always got to tie whatever it is that you're selling to whatever the outcome is that your senior executive is seeking. And so we take a skills-based approach, right? So I think very much similar to what you're saying. And to sell that, a big part of that push has been, we don't need to require bachelor's degrees for most of our jobs, right? Somebody who's coming in to the organization as an entry-level assistant probably may have skills, right? Having worked on the job elsewhere. So we found that the bachelor's degrees was a barrier for a lot of prospective candidates. So we look at the skills, I think, more so than the education itself. I think that's a big way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rita, I'd love to bounce it back to you to talk a little bit more about Tech Elevator. So Tech Elevator provides coding boot camps, in-house reskilling programs. Why are more employers increasingly turning to these certification models, formats like what Tech Elevator offers? And also, how do these certification programs, how do they help HR leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think economic conditions really control how we hire. So I think the first thing is they're challenging all our HR leaders to really trim payroll, but at the same time increase value and performance of their employees. So certification programs are really a great way to take those learning and development dollars, your in-house dollars, and find the talent within your organization to know your culture, know your clients, know your company, and reskill them to those hard to hire jobs. Mm-hmm. The average software developer costs $60,000 to find, onboard, and train that person. Whereas instead, you can invest inside of that talent. And I think it also goes back to what Brian was saying. There's this softening of demand for bachelor's degrees. I've been in workforce development for a long time, and we've left tons of untapped talent on the table by requiring a bachelor's degree for people who have skills-based training that they can successfully enter these roles and outperform their counterparts. I also think the last thing is just scalability. That we're not producing the talent. There's less and less people exiting with higher education degrees and more people entering the workforce with these skills-based training. We need to hire people en masse with these. The demands are constantly changing in our workforce. We need to find a way to hire these people at scale.
Yeah, and even speaking as a finance journalist, another variant is the price of a college degree, mm-hmm. and how that has changing dramatically to where, for that to be qualifications based. To open it up for the group, what are some best practices to consider when seeking out these external reskilling programs, certification programs? When should leaders outsource it, and when should leaders try to execute it in-house?
I think it really depends on the type of positions. So when you're looking at external partners, it's really for classifications that maybe are really your background, your backbone. And so having broad technical fundamental skills that can easily be outsourced. When you're talking about industry competitive advantage, your PI, then you want to keep it in-house, and you want to have a different pathway towards building that talent capacity.
Yeah, that's
I completely agree, right? So we think about that, we look at this a lot, right, as actually a way to save on costs. So you may hire somebody who has a very niche specific skill. An example I'm thinking of is employer relations, right? But if you have a need for somebody to lead employer relations, but also an element of their role is really more of that business partner function, I'm more than comfortable hiring somebody with that depth of ER experience, because it's not easy to find. And then to upskill, perhaps with a certification outsourced, right, on the business partner thing. And of course, we're going to train in-house as well. But I think that's also a really great way to save on costs. I didn't have to add another person to support 80 employees, which is a small group. I was able to upskill someone I'd hired on the employee relations side. And then when we think about looking in-house for training, I completely agree with you, right? So if it's something where it's competitive advantage in nature, or we're talking about a skill set that is really only known in-house on the job, and then we've got to have somebody on the job trained, right? And so we've actually, during the pandemic, we saw an uptick, which is great for business in content and television production in particular. But this led to a shortage, unfortunately, of specifically production accountants. And that skill is a skill that is really honed in-house, right? It's honed on the job, it's progressive. And we didn't have the competitive or really financial backing to do what a lot of our competitors did, which was to simply pay accountants between projects, which was not financially viable for us. So we really put a lot of thought into, okay, how are we going to upskill internally, right? How can we spend a bit more so that we can provide access to one of those accountants to our mid-level, accounting staff to get them trained up? So that we then have them available to work for us in that accounting capacity.
I do think some of it is, the reality of it is you also have to have the resources internally to be able to do, whether it's reskilling or upskilling. When I worked many years ago for Xerox, and we had these hardware engineers that were really ending kind of the term of what their projects were involved in, and we had this huge need for software engineers. And so we had internal resources, we had industrial psychologists and so forth on staff that helped us build those programs. Whereas the reality of a lot of us today work with very small teams, and so it may not be the effort of HR that has to help, particularly with upskilling. You kind of rely then on your functional leaders to create a program to help do that. And so that's where we can provide the value to those business leaders on how do you build these programs to give people those skills and experiences they need in order for them to be able to have a bigger role in the organization.
That's super important. So I was just going to say, we did exactly that, right? Because we don't have the bandwidth to provide an L&D, professional from our team for every single production, right? So it's providing that guidance to the business who then build this program and run it. So yeah, I think that's really important.
I would add that you have to set up the infrastructure internally, right? To be able to think about succession planning, think about rising talent, think about the way that we're seeing people in there, the way we're seeing high potential people, and having those open communication channels between things that used to be what I would call more siloed, right? Like I want to hoard talent, but if for the greater organization, there's nothing wrong with saying, like, I have somebody great over here who might be right for this. So how do you create a gig economy within an organization? Meaning, hey, like, come shadow over here and actually work on a project for a little bit of your time, like, to see if it's possible. And then, yeah, maybe there's a relocation. Maybe there's a way you move into a different part of the business, right? So that that's the investment in our employees and in ourselves, because honestly, I'm part of that. I'm a toy developer and who became this, but I took these little things and the opportunities were there. So I think that's a way to also, when we think about financial viability, we start to think about, like, well, there's the search for other people, might not work out, we're just replacing the next person with that. No, but why not invest a little bit more in the upfront internally, and then it can prove out to be
a net gain. Yeah, love a good upskill. Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit more about like volume of recruiting. Eric, retail is an industry where the lion's share of employees work in stores, as you mentioned, 800 stores, and sometimes with large seasonal hiring targets, like right now. So thank you for being here. What are some strategies that Hot Topic uses to widen the net in appealing to potential future employees, including things like existing customer base and apps?
Sure, great, thank you. I think some of the things that we do at Hot Topic that have made us so successful aren't necessarily groundbreaking, but I think we just do them really well. I think one of the things we do is every single touch point we have with a potential candidate, we want to have them reflect the sort of work environment that they're going to be in. So even something as simple as the URL that we chose for our careers page, we didn't want to make it Hot Topic Careers because that sounded really corporate. So we chose workatht.com, workatbl.com, excuse me. So even something as simple as that, we wanted that touch point to be real. The imagery that we use reflects, we took our real team members and put them in the pictures that we use for there. We use taglines that are really fun and kind of talk about our environment. We say, smells like team spirit. Or one of them here is, working here is the shit. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not supposed to cuss on camera, but things that would reflect to a young person who's looking for a job at Hot Topic or Box Lunch. So that all those little touch points you have with potential candidates, we want it to really be reflective of kind of who we are as an organization and where they would be joining. I think the other thing that we do is we really do take a look at innovation in terms of how do we get people into our hiring process as quickly and easily as possible. So we do things like a lot of people do, QR codes to make the application enter into your ATS very easy. We have a text to apply, so our candidates, particularly in our stores, where everyone is on their phone, can text to apply to start the process with us. I think what's been really helpful for us is we have a chat bot that we use that interacts with all of our potential candidates, helps them search out where the job opportunities are, and that's kind of the entry into our applicant tracking system. Last year, we had about 94,000 candidates, qualified candidates funneled through that chatbot. So it's been really just an incredible productivity enhancer for us. And then I think the other thing that is kind of simple but really powerful on how you use it is really around referral programs and to use it really broadly. So as you can imagine, our stores, we have some customers that come in not just weekly, but a couple times a week, because they want to see what's new, what's different. They build a relationship with the store teams that's there. We convert so many of our fanatical customers into being our sales associates and managers in our store because they get to know each other really well. They're both, they will link over like exciting about Marvel or Barbie or whatever it may be. And so those referral programs are really robust. And another example that we have one of our 2 distribution centers is outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And just by happenstance, we ended up getting a very small group of employees that were Somali and Ethiopian. And because of the fact that they had a great working experience working on Hot Topic, we were able to use them to build inroads into their communities. And so many of them were having difficult times because of whether it's language barriers or so forth, getting jobs in the area. And the fact that they felt so welcome when they came to us at Hot Topic, it really helped us to build now this very large community of folks. And we even translate documents now into Arabic for that building because we have such a large population now that we wanted to be able to communicate with everyone effectively.
It's really, really cool. I want to open it up to the group, just for the leaders in the room who are like, my number one challenge right now is finding the talent. Like it just finding the talent. It feels very much like the well is dry at the moment. Advice, suggestions for anyone on the panel of advice you'd give to anyone in the room for whom finding the talent is the biggest pain in the butt right now.
I say Bertha and I have like tons of untapped talent. There's literally so much talent that's left on the table with groups that we just don't normally turn to. So the neurodiverse, the veterans, the career transitioners, the recently incarcerated folks. There's lots of workforce programs across the United States. They're in every state and every community that have tons and tons of really good talent that just have a barrier to entry. Yeah. And we're leaving those folks on the table. We're actively seeking out other people who might have access to go in and use their phone and look at a QR code, where we can be turning to some of these workforce programs in our communities and really accessing that talent.
And I would add, by working towards removing the barrier of the initial degree, also looking at journeyman positions and apprenticeship positions so that people are they're coming in with the core fundamentals, but then you get to train them within your culture and you get to provide the knowledge, the skills and abilities so that they could really grow and thrive within your environment.
I was going to say to you, yeah, all of that, completely agree. And working for a company like Lionsgate in terms of our brand, because that's another big part of it, right? The employer brand is huge, and candidates out there, if they're recruited or they come upon the job page, they want to get a sense of everything you touched on, right? Mm-hmm. What are the values? Do you live by them? What is your DEI philosophy? And can I see it, right? Is it tangible on the website? Can I get a sense of what an employee experience is at your company? I think, for us in the entertainment side of things, we've relied heavily, I think, just on the brand itself. We haven't had to work really hard to kind of make these things known in the past, but that's shifting, and so we've kind of taken a step back and really launched a real push to highlight all of the amazing things that there are about working at a company like Lionsgate. We've put our DEI initiatives and philosophy front and center. We've removed barriers, which you touched on, specific to bachelor's degrees that we don't need to require in job descriptions. And then we show it, right? We want to show it on the website so that our prospective candidates can get a sense of what it is to work at our company.
I'll reiterate, just looking internally, I think we so often overlook the individuals that are in our companies. We just reskilled a whole bunch of people from Niantic and AutoZone. How do you take a distribution worker and reskill them to their tech teams? How do you take somebody inside of a warehouse and give them the opportunity to gain the skills and move on to your teams that are harder to hire for? Yeah. So really looking internally is, I think, something often overlooked. There's tons of internal talent in your organization.
Yeah. So we have a small industry. The toy industry, if you think about it, there's like 4 or 5 major players. And so there's a history of people just bouncing between. So it's a very insular, industry. So how do we find new talent? You look industry adjacent. Is there something like that somebody who might have worked for Ford or GM, and they're like, I just love cars. And they're like, you know what? I think I would love to try and design small scale cars. Cool, check it out. All right, we're here. If you're doing traditional marketing, or you're doing social media marketing, or whatever it may be, your experience matters, and the way that you think about the culture, they're feeding into the culture with which we want to create. And so thinking about additive people, and that additive doesn't mean that you have to just replace the last person with the last person. Think of it as how can we find the next thing that can push us forward. And so I think it takes a lot of effort to do that. And it's incumbent upon leaders to say, hey, we didn't look at this the last time we did this. We better do it this time. Because we know the turnover rate, because we just took this traditional method that we used to take. Now we're looking again 3 months later. No, let's look out, let's cast a wider net, let's cast a wider vision, let's cast a wider thought of our purpose, and then that might attract other people and be open to it. But that takes a lot of skill internally to twist minds a little bit, right? So that folks aren't just like, well, we just don't do it that way here. Well, no, why not?
Yeah, love it. Bertha, let's talk about Empower. So Empower offers pathways to economic prosperity by launching digital careers for military veterans and young adults from underserved communities. The nonprofit turns 25 next year. Congratulations. How has interest in the company's placement programs changed? And do you find that companies are more willing to hire candidates with non-traditional qualifications than in years past?
I wish it was a broad yes, but we're working on that.
Yeah.
We're working on that. And one of our competitive advantages for Empower is that all of our training is conducted in-house, internally across the nation. And our instructors and our methodology is really based on the national standards of technology. And so we really do work on providing people with the fundamental skills, so that whenever anyone takes the opportunity and actually onboards our talent, they come back to us. The retention rate with all of our hiring partners is really strong because they know the quality of the individuals that we're providing for them. And so the entryways, the pathways are there, the talent, the way that we place them, that's a core part of the whole pillar. So yes,
Awesome.
we're working towards more yeses.
Yes, for sure. Well, let's get the whole room on your side. So for the whole group to follow up, if stakeholders in the room are experiencing pushback about things like minimum job qualifications, got to have a master's degree, what are some strategies they can use to try to win over those decision makers in their organization?
I was going to say, I think first, one of the big things that we did that was incredibly helpful was, if you don't already, put into place an inclusive hiring process. That was really big because that was something launched by our DEI team and ultimately bought into by our C-suite and the rest of the organization. And once that was put into place, it has all of the parameters, right, that we need to ensure that we're not putting up barriers and that we are considering candidates with alternative backgrounds who maybe don't have sort of that traditional path that we had anticipated in the past. So I think that for us was a huge win. Getting that process into place, obviously it's very change management heavy. It wasn't easy, but a big part of that too is selling that vision, of what and tying it to those outcomes that we want, right? So we don't want to have a problem recruiting. We don't want jobs to sit open. We want to be successful as a business. We want to see, positive outcomes across the board. And so I think another big part of it is selling that vision and then providing data. I would say for my executives in particular, they love it. They love research. They love data. And if you kind of sell a compelling reason as to why they should kind of change their mindset, it's often well received. I can't tell you how many times I share Forbes articles, with my executives to say, hey, here's why I'm thinking the way that I am.
I would also add that the demographics of executive suites are changing as well. And there are more people in executive suites who might have been what you call underrepresented or underseen, and so I think that there's more an affinity in certain places where folks say like, hey, you know what? My route might have been more non-traditional than ever. And yet I sit in this space, so like maybe there's a little bit more a receptor open. So the story that I say to our senior management is, look, Dr. Scholes, right? He had to become a doctor to tell me that to walk on pillows, it was more comfortable. Why couldn't I hire Mrs. Scholes or Mr. Scholes? Right? We don't need those things. Now, of course, that's not to discount anyone who's Dr. Scholes. We value him just as much, but let's widen our eyes. And I think we're in a time where we think about generational transformation of leadership. We sit at a very there's a lot of opportunity out there, and there's a lot of also, it's tenuous when change is amongst us. And so I think it's constant reiteration, being in the room. How is your organization set up? Who's in the room when they're actually trying to change the way or evolve the organization? Because if the person who's trying to promote things that are maybe progressive is 4 layers removed, well, we're not hearing the voice. But if we're organizationally set up to have folks in the room who are actually valued for being in the room, for thinking this way, well, that's an easier path.
I think that, just to build on what Mason said, I think the other thing is also that trust in the relationships has to be there, so that whoever you're trying to influence understands kind of that, okay, this person I've worked with before, I believe in them, I trust them, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. I think one of the reasons why we have such a really good relationship with our hiring managers internally is because we have such a seasoned group of tenured recruiters that have been with the company a number of years and that have a demonstrated record of success. So when they want to go to a hiring manager and say, I know this is what you think you want, but how about if we look at this? They can have that conversation because they have that mutual respect and that trust built with each other already. So that trust has to be there, kind of permeating the whole relationship.
100%.
Great point.
To build on that, I think a big part of that trust in any business is just a really deep understanding of what that business is, right? So if we're talking about a job, having a deep understanding of what those job responsibilities are and how they directly tie and connect to whatever the outcomes are that they're seeking, right? As a business leader, if you have that familiarity, then that's going to build trust, right? I think to build trust, in my experience, you've got to kind of really immerse yourself, if you're in that capacity, right, with the business and understand what's needed, because otherwise it's going to be difficult to sort of convince a hiring leader that they should consider an alternate route if you don't have that solid understanding and connection to what it is that role performs as a function.
Brian, I'd love to stay with you for this next question. So entertainment's an industry that's experienced a lot of transformation. You have COVID remote production, you have AI concerns. So one, how's it been going? Being in entertainment this year with a lot going on. And then also, are there any strategies that you have with regard to workforce planning that can just kind of help future-proof against unforeseen circumstances or situations in the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we think about the pandemic, for us, it was actually obviously there was a period of time where no one knew what was going on. But as soon as the guilds came together and we had a return to work agreement, we got back to work pretty quickly, just under a year or so, we're back at it. And business was booming. So actually the volume was pretty wild. We tripled our slate of TV shows in particular. So the pandemic wasn't as bad as we thought for a lot of reasons. We saw an uptick in business because of that need for content. But I think what you're getting at is, in our business, roles are pretty, sort of defined, right? And I think that it can be difficult when we think about talent management in particular, when we think about retention of certain levels of employees. Becomes a challenge because there are only so many roles, right, within each organization to support a very specific function. And so when we think about that, one of the strategies really is that focus on talent management. So if we think about, a coordinator level role on a creative side for television, they're not going to, see a promotion unless there's someone perhaps leaves the organization or there's growth. But that's the positive side of it, right? So we're very growth focused. So I would say that's one of the really real selling points to our employees is that as the business grows, then there's a need for growth across the organization, right? Meaning promotions, new roles to support the volume that comes with that business growth. So I think there's a focus on ensuring that our employees know that and they know how the business functions and they know what would lead to their promotion, even though the person that they report into or above them is not leaving the organization, right? So they know that as the business grows and succeeds, there will be a need for additional roles. So then they can see growth that way. The other piece of it is we spend a lot of time, we do talent management as part of our workforce planning effort annually. And that's really critical as well. So we think about, as part of that talent management piece of it, we not only look at, the compensation and what their role is, we look at, are they receiving that development that they need, right? Are they fulfilled? Are they happy in their role? And there are lots of ways to look at that, but that's really a moment where we can say, okay, so we're gonna we're going to have this employee, even though there's not a promotion right at this very moment, we're going to have this employee take on a stretch assignment. Perhaps they're going to, go take second lead on a particular project, right? So they'll shadow, they'll be able to contribute, even though they're not in that role. Or maybe it's a moment where we say, okay, we're going to plug them into a coaching program. Maybe they'll join a cohort, right? We've got an internal coaching program. Maybe it's an opportunity to plug them into the mentorship program. Maybe it's an opportunity for certification, right? So that's a big focus on retention to ensure that our employees are continuing to be fulfilled and engaged, while they're on that promotion track, which is not, necessarily right in front of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of, the workforce planning element of it, I would say on the television side, it's less of a concern. On the television distribution side, it is more of a concern because it's a much larger organization and they're selling, content around the globe. And so really the strategy is exactly kind of what I sort of touched on. We look at on a regular basis, are there skill gaps? What we assess bench strength, right? Like, so what is your team? Is your team in place? Are they equipped to accomplish whatever the objectives are that you've got on the table here? We look at strategy first and foremost, and then we assess the strategies as they relate to people. So we want to understand, do we have the right people in place to achieve and accomplish these strategies? Sure, we've got the right people, but maybe some of those people need to be upskilled. Maybe some of those people we consider a flight risk. Maybe they seem a little disengaged. So we want to, give them a stretch assignment, right? So that we ensure retention, again, in support of those strategies. But I would say that's the major focus. It's looking at the strategies at play as at the top of your workforce planning effort, and then matching those strategies with people strategies.
I'd be remiss if, since I mentioned the word AI, now I'm going to have to ask the follow-up question about it. With 5 executives on the stage, anything specific for anyone to answer in just one response, since we're almost at time? Anything that stakeholders in the room should really be paying attention to with regard to AI implementation in recruiting, training, people leadership, anything like that?
Yeah, AI can be biased, just like people, because it's made by people, and then it becomes itself. So I would say, watch out for bias, and how do we mitigate against that? And there has to, just because something is there, doesn't mean that it has to be the only thing there. And so I'm very, technology for technology's sake is not the way to go. Technology for the way to empower and to accelerate the things that we want to do as a business is the way to use technology. It's a tool in a tool belt. Just like, a fax machine was a tool in a tool belt 40 years ago. That shit's revolutionary. No. You know what I mean? Keep things in perspective,
And sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I would say it is a tool in the toolkit, definitely, but look into it and add it as appropriate, because it could definitely enhance and amplify the work and change all of our positions now across the board. All of us, we may be in roles that existed 20 or 40 years ago, but the way we operate is not the same as the way they did. And 100%. So incorporating it smartly is also an approach.
Terrific. I'm gonna move us along because we're just about at time, because I really want to do the lightning round. So we're gonna finish up with a little lightning round question. Give you all some action items. I know that's the lightning round sound officially. So if leaders in the room they're currently feeling the talent crunch, what's one action they could take tomorrow to widen the net and increased interest? And let's just go down the line, just like 1 or 2 sentences, an action that people in the room could start taking tomorrow to close that talent gap. Bertha, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I think we're really talking about being agile in terms of the methods used to onboard, and also the way that you look at the people that you're bringing. Agility is a big factor.
Love it. Rita?
Look internally, reskill your team to take on those roles that are hard to hire for, and cast your net wider. Look at all that untapped talent that's in your community that you're blocking because of your traditional mindset of how you onboarded talent in the past.
Yeah. Brian?
I would say find a way to connect it to your values and put into place an inclusive hiring process. It was the best thing we could have done.
Eric?
Can I ditto Rita? That's why I think look internally, not just for that internal talent that you have within, but like I was mentioning, the referrals that internal talent can provide to your organization.
I'm gonna give a 4-piece amen, and then also say, look to the people that you would have looked to in your life to never have talked to. Bring that person in.
Love it. All right, that's our time. Let's all give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much.